Hello, and welcome back to The Great Game, an Australian mega game podcast. I'm Patrick,
And I'm Jack.
and this episode we're talking to John Keyworth of Kiwi Game Design about the Anubis Heresy and all things online mega games. Before we get started, over to Jack, who's got some news from the global world of mega games.
Yeah, so just a quick update. So the Mega Game Coalition has just announced the first two Mega Games that will be running at Gen Con online. And apparently two more are potentially coming soon to that as well. If you We'll include a link in the description, but if you have a look at it, there's Den of Wolves online and Draft Night 3078, which is a fantasy sports draft mega game, which is awesome. And then also there is a mega game seminar called The State of Mega Games, which will basically be discussing the mega game community and how the scene is evolving. So yeah, really awesome stuff. It looks like for the online Gen Con, and I'm excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing some of that more action in the online space. Before we jump into the episode, quick disclaimer that we had some minor audio difficulties with this recording. We've done pretty well to get to episode 8, and it was bound to happen. So bear with us, and I hope you still enjoy the listen. All right. Thanks for joining us, John. Before we jumped into talking about mega games and the work that you've been doing recently, I just wanted to ask you sort of what your background is in mega games. How did you get into it all? What's your role in the community? Are you more of a player or a designer? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so my first game, I had to look it up, was Watch the Skies, like probably most people. That was in 2017 in Kennington. That was one of John Meison's Southwest Mega Games games. Yeah, I just got invited along by a sort of a group of friends that I had used to roleplay with, and then kind of stuck around basically when they didn't.
And when did you make the leap into designing your own games?
So that was, I think it was just the next year because we started Reading Megagames like a year later in 2018, which is when I started talking like seriously about designing a game, and that's where Relics of the Fall came from, basically, which I ran the following year, which is last year.
Okay.
Awesome.
As a player, like following Watch the Skies in 2017, have you played many mega games?
Yeah, I'm not quite been to 20 yet, but it's getting close, I think. So it's a fair number. It's not the silly numbers some people manage to attend, but
Absolutely. What was it that really attracted you to mega games after, I guess, going to that first run of Watch the Skies? What made you want to delve in more and then start designing your own?
yeah, I don't know. It's just I mean, especially from a design perspective, it's just such a sort of interesting challenge, really. I've sort of written sort of role playing games and board games and stuff before, but yeah, there's just so many moving parts and so much interesting stuff to problems to solve when you've got a big mega game, which is a bit like actually playing the games. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of problems to solve. Designing is a similar challenge, I think, but on a larger scale. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that kind of leads us on. Let's just have a quick chat about your history with design. You mentioned Relics of the Fall. Before we move on to kind of the big topic, we'll be talking about your most recent online mega game. Tell us a bit about Relics of the Fall and I guess what inspired that and pushed that one to design.
Yeah, so Relics of the Fall, I mean, on the surface, it looks like a game about big stompy mechs and the post-apocalyptic sort of future. What it actually is based on is Southeast Asian hill tribes and the politics surrounding them and empires. There's a book called The Art of Not Being Governed, which was a sort of inspiration behind it. Basically, is how do people in the hills avoid empires just coming in and ruling them? That was a sort of inspiration for it.
And then where did that's fascinating to me, and I'm wondering where the giant robots and the rest of the theme gets layered onto that. Did that happen organically, or was that something you started with?
So I started basically. I came up with a few. I had the idea for the inspiration, then made me think about mechanics, and then I came up with a few sort of ways I could run that game. I could run a historical game set down in the sort of like in the depths of Southeast Asia kind of area, or I could run a more fantastical game, or sort of post-apocalyptic game, that sort of thing, and asked a few people basically, which of these really grabs you, and Big Stompy Mechs kind of won out, which should have been a foregone conclusion maybe.
That's awesome.
The work that you've been doing recently, which is on the Anubis Heresy, which we've got a lot to ask you about. Did
Yeah.
that is that your second design? Was there anything in between that and Relics?
So there should have been, because last week I should have ran Club 1927, which is a gangster sort of Prohibition era style game, which I didn't want to take online because I quite enjoyed the idea of running it in person. I got some sort of fun mechanics that would only really work if you're all in the same room. So yeah, that's done. It's not done. I still need to do some more sort of flesh out the briefs and get the components all designed and things like that. Because I put it on hold because of the lockdown.
It's a unfortunate recurring theme. It looks like with a lot of games that were being in design or close to finish. We'll have to have a chat another time about that one in particular because it's something that's in the back of my design folder as well. Something in sort of Prohibition era.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear more about that. But for now, I wanted to talk about the Anubis Heresy and start by asking you how you came up with the idea of this. Mechanically and thematically, I think thematically we can kind of guess, but where did it all start?
Yeah, so obviously when the lockdown happened, and I thought, maybe we could run something online. Then obviously Gothenburg picked up that pattern quicker than I did. But yeah, so I was wondering what to run. I keep a big list of sort of game ideas, basically whenever anything sort of inspiration strikes. Basically, I'll note it down because you get too many ideas for games. So I just put it in a big list. So I went to my list and wondered what would sort of fit running it online. What could be relatively simple, sort of mechanically, and what could we do? And this one sort of jumped out. Basically, was a game based on the Horus Heresy. It didn't have any. It wasn't like any more fleshed out than that.
Okay.
Awesome. So for listeners who may not know, the Horus Heresy is a big part of the lore of Warhammer 40k, and obviously what the Anubis Heresy is based on, but legally distinct from.
Yep.
Of course. So this was built from the ground up for online then, in that case.
Yeah, it was deliberately. It wasn't. I mean, it might have ended up occurring another time, but it was, definitely this design has been. I want to run a game online. Let's write a game to run online. So I was trying to keep it simple. So the game that actually got ran was largely based on Matrix games. Familiar with those?
No.
Yeah, Matrix games are a type of war game where you make arguments to take actions, and then so you're telling an umpire, "Oh, we're going to attack from here. We're going to win because it's an ambush because we've got good reconnaissance and the enemy is still disorganized from that last, thing that happened." And they might give you bonuses, and then the enemy might go, "Oh no, but we've got this fancy technology, and so we should get bonuses." And then you roll some dice and sort it out. resolve what happens, basically. So it's a very simple sort of system where you're, making arguments for what should happen, and then is resolved by a control figure, basically.
Absolutely, that's something we've been thinking a lot about ourselves, is how to keep things fairly simple for the online arena and based without creating a very complex architecture like you have in a mega game, where it's when it's in person, it's very easy to have fairly complex mechanics where people are trading things around and doing that, and a lot of that stuff is more difficult to bring online. I think so. I guess one of the questions I really wanted to ask you is, I guess, what do you think in developing the Anubis Heresy? Sorry, what did you see as the big, I guess, opportunities of making a game specifically for online, and what were the big challenges you wanted to resolve?
Yeah, so I think that's changed from when I first started writing it. Originally, I just wanted to get something online. I thought something simple and to fit online. But I suppose like the history of the two playtests is the first one was ran on Discord and Roll20, and I wrote a whole load of scripts for Roll20 to try and manage the sort of the game mechanics, the movement of the tokens, jumping between sectors, that sort of thing. And it was technically a bit of a nightmare. It wasn't a very stable sort of platform to work with. I mean, my code was written very quickly, so that wasn't very stable either. The interface just wasn't quite up to the task, because when you're playing a mega game, obviously you turn up, you don't have time to learn an interface and to get used to its sort of problems, which is a problem we've had on Discord as well, because Discord isn't actually very intuitive. So often people can turn up to that and then not really know what buttons to press to do things. So for the second playtest, I ended up writing my own platform for it, which,
Oh wow.
yeah, I mean, it still had problems, but I think it's got a lot more. It can go a lot further. There's a lot more progress that can be made because it's not restricted by the limitations of something like Roll20. I mean, it's going to be a lot of work, but that's where I'm focusing now, because I think you can have these simple rules on top. You can have a matrix game or other similar sort of simple thing on the top of it. But if you've got a computer running underneath, then that can handle some of the complexity for you.
Awesome. Yeah, so I was in the first playtest with Roll20, and I confess what I ended up doing, because I had a lot of some troubles with the Roll20 interface, is I did end up focusing a lot more on the role-playing aspect of it and not touching the mechanical parts of it in Roll20 as much. So tell us about this. So you've moved away from that and created your own platform. Tell us about, I guess, the process of that and what that's looking at like at this point, because that sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, my day job's programming, so that's obviously a help for anyone who, I suppose, these words mean anything to. It is a Node.js server that, yeah, and then everything is built on top of that. So there's scripts and databases and all the things you normally expect. For the second playtests, yeah, we were using a Google Sheet as a backend, like a database, because I was worried if it all collapses, we need to be able to keep running the game. So let's have all the data in a spreadsheet, basically, that we can play the game from. And I nearly did that. I nearly pulled the plug halfway through the game because there was a period of about half an hour when the technical problems were overwhelming things, but that seemed to clear up eventually, or mostly clear up anyway. Yeah, so that's what that is. So, I mean, the advantages are I could just hand someone a link and they could follow the link and they'd be logged in to their character. It would link up to their Discord because they'd type in their Discord username and it would all just work technically.
Awesome.
And I can make it look like what I like. I can, filter out bits and bobs. I'd like to get the voice comms built into the client, but I spent about a week on that and I'm going to come back to it, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. That sounds like an amazing platform.
yeah, it's perfectly possible. It's just work. I've got a lot of work to do because after that play test, I've had to go through and try and sort of rebuild it to be a lot more robust, to use a better database. To control need a lot of options for being able to fudge anything in the game, and there are a couple of things that they couldn't do last time.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've gone through a similar journey. We have run a couple of playtests for an online mega game, gothic horror themed, called Dark and Stormy Night, using a lot of stuff we'd kind of kludged together from other places, like different, forum software, stuff like that. And we did struggle a lot with the technical side and technical difficulties like you were talking about on Roll20 and all of that kind of thing. So now we're at probably a pretty similar stage where we, not as far advanced as you are with your platform, but where we need to step back and look at the technical side of things and figure out how we can do this without all of the technical issues getting in the way of the game, which I think feels like a really huge problem for online mega games to solve.
Yeah, that's why I thought, I don't know if it's, hopefully it'll get to the point where you can just boot it up and run a game and it will be fine and you don't have to worry about it. But that's not this game, that's not next game, and that's probably not 10 games time. That's it's such a big sort of technical challenge basically, and unfortunately it's like a normal mega game. You can only really playtest it when you're running a big game. So
Yeah.
everything works fine on my machine. You open it up to 20 people, it starts falling over. Even with the tests we had with sort of 3 or 4 people sort of logging on and jumping around and breaking things, I still don't quite prepare you for even a 20-person kind of half-size playtest.
Yeah, it sounds like a very similar experience that we've been having, and like Jack said, we're really focused on the technical side now, and I find it a little bit ironic that pre-lockdown and considering putting a mega game online, I always thought in my design and putting together components for games, my rule was to keep it as tech light as possible, and I always thought that once technology starts getting involved, like using tablets to record things and spreadsheets and stuff, you were going down the wrong path. So it's funny how we've evolved a little, being forced to.
I still agree with that in meat space games. I think that I'm not going to be introducing technology in anything I'm designing in the real world anytime soon. I think there is a certain something to having actual components and understanding the rules based on like the cards you're trading and the things you're moving around.
I think that is something we encountered as well, is that when you're in person with people, the rules comprehension does come a lot easier because everything is physical components and because you're in there in the room, and if you can give them those instructions in person and all of that kind of thing. Whereas online, there can be a lot more opportunities for confusion, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Hoping that's something that can be solved with a decent platform. If you've got the same, if all you can do is what the rules let you do. Now, if there's help built into it, if you've got good tooltips and all the things you normally expect from a computer game, built into your interface, that should be able to guide you through some basic mechanics. And then anything more complicated than that needs to run under the hood, and you just need to, and that then needs to be intuitive. If there's a complicated simulation running, you need to just assume it's going to work how you expect it's going to work, not really know the rules. Just ignore. That combat happened. We don't really care how it happened. We just know that the bigger force won, or however you want to play it.
Yeah, it's funny the way that we are nevertheless evolving these things to suit the whatever medium we have to work in on the day. I wanted to just pull us back to the Anubis Heresy itself and the game, without going into too much detail. John, did you want to walk us through the game, sort of in a nutshell, starting off with sort of what are people doing in the game, what roles and teams are involved, and what's everyone sort of working towards?
Okay. So the sort of the setting of the game, I guess, will then explain the factions and the roles. So you've got, imagine a galaxy-spanning empire of humans, and then all of your sort of jump gate technology shuts down for a long period of time, hundreds, thousands of years. So you've got this new dark age, and then someone comes on Earth. They are the Golden Tsar. Well, that's what they've called themselves, and they're this sort of, they start off as a sort of archaeologist digging up this old technology and working out how it works, and then they create. They manage to reactivate these jump gates, and they manage to create the legions, the Legio Astra, I think I called them, Star Legions, which are basically Space Marines. So they've created these sort of armies of genetically enhanced super soldiers. They've retaken Earth and sort of united it into the hegemony. Then there's Sabbats. So you've got the Tsar at the top, basically, and then within the hegemony, you've got the Legion teams. So we've got 3 legions that have been written, but there are plans for 7. They've each got their own sort of distinct culture and sort of way of doing things, much like in the source material. So they go out to reconquer the galaxy. They make an alliance with the Jovian Order, who are these sort of technologists who live on the moons around Mars, and they've been building this thing called how to pronounce it, Matryoku brain, not the Russian doll, around Jupiter, which is a sort of sci-fi concept where you can make this incredibly powerful artificial intelligence using all of the energy that gets radiated from something like Jupiter or a star or something. And they're hoping to then achieve some kind of digital transcendence and godhood through the creation of this sort of godlike AI. And they're the stand-ins for the Martian tech priests. So the legions go out and conquer the galaxy, but then the Tsar wants to go back to Terra to work on some new project. And so he makes this new government called the Sanctora Imperium, who are the new civilian government. So that's one faction, the Sanctora Imperium. They've got the Sanctora Guard, who are the space cops, basically. With what's going on in the world at the moment, I can't imagine giving cops the ability to destroy planets, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got this situation where you've got the Legion factions and the new Sanctora factions, and there's a tension there because the Legions have been the top dogs and they had been kind of ruling themselves and sort of riding out to battle with the Tsar, and it's all been very glorious. But now there's these new sort of civilian mortal types who have been, they're not technically in charge of them, but they feel like they're in charge of them. And so that creates tension in the game. So the other thing that's a faction will be the gods of the Maelstrom, the elders, who are going to be the entities. They're not played, but they are they're the whispers in the ears of the legions and the people that are going to create the heresy and whatever the civil war ends up looking like, which is something that's changed in both games, like why there is a civil war, who's on what side, and that sort of thing, just to keep people on their toes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so this is something I experienced in the first playtest where I was suddenly and violently betrayed by several people. Take us through, I guess, how you've changed it and how you're looking at it now, I guess, in terms of those mechanics.
Yeah. So the mechanics are quite similar, as in each traitor will know 1 or 2 other traitors at the start of the game. They'll know who they are, and that creates this sort of web of traitors that don't really know what's going on.
Cool.
So the first part of the game is trying to get into contact with each other without drawing suspicion. Then you have to organise how you're going to, start the civil war, and then you have to fight it. So that side of things is the same. I tried to put in about a third of traitors because of some last-minute roll swaps in the second playtest. We actually nearly had half traitors, which was
Oh wow,
a bit much. Basically, that was a mistake. But Yeah, that's just a balancing issue. Hopefully, with a bigger game, it'll be easier to keep an eye on those numbers, and a couple of
Right.
people changing numbers won't drastically change anything. But yeah, in the first game, it was very straight up. Anubis, the chosen war marshal for the legions in the Tsar's absence, um, had been in contact with the elders of the Maelstrom and had decided to, he'd been abandoned by the Tsar and ought to be ruling in his place, really. So
Mm.
fairly Horus Heresy like. In the second one, the Tsar's secret project was to try and ascend to godhood, to try and draw upon the energy of the Maelstrom to displace the existing elders and take their place, which the elders didn't like, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And the legions were quite happy with. They practically worship the Tsar as god as it is, but the Sanctorum Imperium did not like the idea that they would be usurped by this godlike figure, and humanity would end up in chains forever, basically. So they were the ones talking to the elders and hatch this plan, basically, to fortify Earth until they could manage to get to the Tsar and finish him off. A completely different team were the traitors in that one.
Yeah, I like that, mixing it up. So why don't we go through just, I guess, the key theaters of the game, or the pieces that each player is interacting with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's the common section, which everybody can do. So they've all got a little icon on the map, which they can move around, visit planets, and then take actions, which are the Matrix Games actions, where they talk to Control. There, and then each role gets something specific that they can do. So there's a council of players, who there is a Galactic Council. In the actual game, there ought to be two. Like a civilian council and a war council, but obviously in a playtest it's smaller, so we just had one. So they are seeing to the issues of the day, passing motions. In the first playtest it was a little light, so I gave them a budget. In the second one, based on what planets they control, which is something I would never have done in like the sheer number of planets and how that budget was calculated is something that wouldn't happen in a real life mega game. Like it depends on sort of planetary populations and who's controlling what, and the admin work would be ridiculous, but the computer just does it. So they get a budget they can spend, and they can spend it on anything they like. But there was a list of sort of fixed mechanical things that they could definitely do, like reinforce certain factions or increase their infrastructure in places and things like that. So they had some ideas, and they had some sort of things to be getting on with. There was the generals, so they had their fleets, but their fleets had in the first game they had separate fleets of ships that they could move around and have this combat mechanic happen, which was a system called Scrud, which is also popular in Matrix games, but I'm probably going to move away from.
I'm not a fan of how that system worked in the playtests, or
no, it didn't seem to give them the feedback they wanted. The fights didn't seem so in 40K itself. A lot of the fights are sort of all the action is centered around these sort of planetary drops and this sort of ground combat. What this ended up being was a fairly vanilla sort of, you just kind of throw some big spaceships at each other, and you don't really get any feeling for the setting. It's not very evocative, basically. So maybe I could salvage it. Maybe I could do something with that. But I'm going to look at it basically to try and make it feel like you're doing something more exciting when you're having a battle. Because that's a big part, obviously, for the generals. Probably split the space battles be more abstracted and have generals come in with their ground forces to take planets and actually get the job done. Not entirely sure where I'm going with that at the moment, but it's still, Then we had the quartermaster characters, that's definitely a role that's going to have to change a lot. So they were in charge of sort of building ships, reinforcing fleets, repairing things. They had some build points basically that they spent on things, which kept them a little bit detached and a little bit anchored to the places where they built things. That wasn't as good a role as it could have been. So as the quartermasters, we had some that were sort of mixes of generals and quartermasters, like the Jovian speakers, who were, because they were these sort of tech priest type characters, they could build things and they could reinforce things and they could fix things, but they also had these expedition fleets that they would fly around with that happened to be very well armed, basically. And then some players were agents, so they get very little in the way of like fleets and things, but they had bonuses to take actions. Yeah, I mean everyone's taking actions, but that was their main game.
Yeah, right.
And they were distributed amongst the teams, basically those roles. So everyone had a finger in each of the pies.
Awesome. So you mentioned the quartermasters you're planning to revise a bit. What did you find were the issues with that one, and what direction are you thinking of going with them?
So it was a bit of a filler role. It was a little bit of a just click a couple of buttons because you need some more ships. You've got some build points come in. You need to spend them on ships. You need to repair the things that have been damaged. There wasn't really much decisions to be made. There wasn't enough of a game. Possible that the quartermaster role won't be salvaged, and I'll do something else with shipyards. Perhaps there'll be, if I'm splitting up the ground combat and the space combat, maybe there'll be admirals who get to direct fleets in certain directions as their gameplay, and then the generals can focus on the ground combats. We'll have to see how much sort of mechanical tools you'll get to play with once the new systems are written, basically, as to what that role can do. So maybe it will reinforce the fleet, but also direct it. And the generals will be doing their own thing.
It sounds like there's some sort of significant changes or realignments of mechanical stuff coming down the track from those playtests. Are there any other major mechanical pieces within the game that we haven't sort of talked about yet?
No, like I said, I'd like to keep it fairly straightforward. So that was basically it. You've got actions, you've got fleets, you can reinforce the fleets, and you've got a council that does things. And there's traitors. That's the game in a nutshell, basically. I think because of the feedback from the playtests and because of now working on my own platform and being able to do a bit more with it, I think that's given me a lot more room to make a game that exists online, could only exist online in a more interesting way. I could do things with the fleets and directing them that you wouldn't want to do. It would be too fiddly in real life. Whereas with a few clicks of a mouse, you can get it done. Some more stuff for traitors being able to. We had some feedback that it was because your ships didn't really have individual loyalties. So a traitor could say, "Oh, could I borrow these ships from this planet? I need to go and fight a war." And then they say, yeah, then so they can just rock up, take the ships, and then next turn flip to be evil, and all the ships that they've taken are suddenly traitors as well. Evil's the wrong word. Traitors. Yeah. I wouldn't like to say who's evil. Usually both sides.
That was actually something else I wanted to ask you. It's as someone who's not very familiar with the lore of the Warhammer 40k world and the Horus Heresy. It sounds like there's a significant amount of background information that you put together. Is it essentially a reskin of the inspiration, or did you find that it was evolving and being molded into something pretty unique?
So I started off just with we're just going to reskin it, but then so there's something else. There's a big role-playing game I ran for about 10 years for the Essex University Role-Play Game Society, which was it ended up looking a little bit like a mega game, to be honest. It was sort of 20 to 40 people. It took the whole weekend. We had teams of GMs who would like run different sectors of not sectors, but different regions of the continent that it was set on, and they would be in charge of the plot for that region. But then they'd have a character play another ones and all sorts. But from that, basically, I came with the vague idea, and then I got these teams of people basically to write the regions and run the regions for me, and it was amazing. The sheer amount of stuff to invent was overwhelming, and if I'd done it all by myself, it would have been a bit vanilla. It would have just been a fairly bland reskin or something. So for this, so it's something I got interested doing for Mega Games after the second run of Relics, where I started giving the control characters some NPCs to play, and they really got into character with that. And so, oh yes, let's get the control to do more, basically, and to get more invested in it, and not just have this one or two designers at the top designing a game, writing a game, and then handing it off to control to run. Let's actually say get the control on board. So I put out the call and got a whole bunch of people come in to collaborate, and they would write an entire sector of the galaxy with all of these interesting planets in it and sort of factions and systems and all sorts of things going on. I had people writing the legions. Each of the legions that were there were written by someone that wasn't me. I gave them a name and an icon and the rest. Some of these people are familiar with 40k, some of them are not. So how much they adhere to the source code, source material definitely varies. But I think it's had so much input on it from so many people. It's definitely a lot better than it would have been if I'd tried it by myself, and it's moved a lot further away from the source material than if I'd written it by myself.
Yeah, it sounds like a dream design team having that many people come in and help put together those kind of details. It's awesome.
Been a great group of people to work with, and yeah, I mean, there's still 4 legions to write and 2 more sectors, so I'll need some more people, but
get cracking.
yeah, that's it.
You said that you've done a couple of playtests so far, and that you did change a few things in between. How did the playtests go, sort of in comparison to how you thought they were going to go? Were there things that you were expecting to work well that didn't, or vice versa, or did they go pretty much as expected?
Yeah, so I mean, what I was really worried about going into it, like I said, because I kept it fairly simple, I thought I kept it fairly simple and straightforward, was I was mainly worried about the tech, getting that up and running, having it work for the whole day, that sort of thing. And I was right to be worried. There's a lot of code written in a short time. The Roll20 platform was kept on crashing randomly anyway, even if it wasn't my code's fault. It would get overloaded, I think, and just stop working for a bit. That was my chief concern, and that was definitely sort of be right to be concerned about that. And I don't think that running an entire game on Roll20 would have ever worked. So I think the direction it's gone in, while a lot of effort and quite ambitious, is probably the only direction I could have taken it if I want to have this client that kind of makes it easy to run. Yeah, so sort of unexpected things. I mean, we had someone turn up and hope to play the game while playing it on a tablet, which had just completely skipped my mind entirely. I hadn't imagined someone would be playing it on that. But that's something I really want to. It would be really good to support. But I think before that happens, I think all the chat stuff needs to be integrated into the website as well. Basically, so we've got a fair way to go, I think, before we'll be mega gaming on our phones or our tablets. I think it's being able to move between tabs on a browser fairly easily is the way forwards.
Definitely. So after those 2 play tests, what do you feel like at the moment and going forward is your personal favorite thing that's come out of that, or your favorite part of the game at the moment, or something that you're most proud of, I guess?
So, I mean, I think as a general sort of mechanical thing that's come out of it, do enjoy the traitor mechanic. It's a little bit different to something like, say, the Den of Wolves traitor mechanic. I think definitely seems like an interesting way to go with that. I think it's a very simple, obviously, it's a very small part of the small thing. Just the seeding the traitors and telling them about a couple of other people each. But I don't know, there's something about the design. There's simple designs are quite elegant, and that seems to have created quite a nice sort of arc. I mean, it still needs work, and the briefing still needs polishing and that sort of thing, but it needs to be better. But that's definitely something that's not going to get thrown away, even if a bunch of the other parts of it change. And yeah, I mean, again, just the collaborating on it, the collaborative world that we built. I'm not sure if I want to write a game on my own anymore.
Not really.
It's just been so much more interesting and exciting to work on it with a group of people.
Awesome.
And so, what's next for the Anubis Heresy? Is it how far away do you think it is to run a full game?
Well, the game itself probably needs another playtest. Because like we discussed earlier, there are some mechanical bits that need quite a bit of a shake up. The stuff with the fleets and the quartermasters and some of the stuff the traitors can do. There were bottlenecks around control time because of the actions you took were quite control heavy. So there's still work to be done. It still needs more playtesting. But I think the main thing is the platform that it runs on. Currently, I'm planning on running some, or hopefully getting someone else to run some just normal Matrix games, like sort of six-person kind of size games, where just taken out of a book and run as is, just to try and get the platform working and make sure we've got all the tools that Control need, make sure it's fairly reliable, the game's getting saved and running, people can use the interface. Then once that's running, maybe start running with some sort of more medium-sized games. Darren Green's Climate Crisis, I was looking at that.
Awesome.
Might have that over because that'll be about sort of 15. I can't remember exactly the number, but 15 people. It'll be a bit bigger again, and it's got some of the things you'd expect from mega games in. Like it's got a lot of trading of goods, basically. So you've got a lot of cards that you're shifting around. So if I can get that working, that's another thing that builds up this platform. It's another brick of mechanics that work nicely. I was looking at God Emperor as well, actually, because the mechanics of that are quite. I feel like they're quite defined. They're quite well defined, and they'll be quite a good thing to make handled by a computer because there's a lot of order writing and then resolving the orders. And if you write the orders, if a computer then generates a report, if anything, it could be you could do some good things with that. I think that kind of game, and it seems to scale well. So I could run a small game of it to make sure it's working well, and then run a slightly bigger game of it. And then if I can run a 40-person game of that, then the platform works and it's not going to fall over, and I can run my own game on it. So obviously that's a lot of stuff in the coming months.
Absolutely, that's amazing. Yeah, God Emperor is definitely one of the more mechanically heavy things, and I think that's one of its potential greatest flaws is getting people's heads around the mechanics there. So that's exactly where I see online platforms being amazing, is just like you say, calculating everything for you and all that kind of thing.
It sounds like the platform that you're putting together, obviously you are considering running other Matrix games on there to test different features of it. Are you designing it so that it will be sort of modular, so that you can run different game systems on it, or will it need a lot of work to adapt to new systems?
It will be, I'd say, a little bit modular, basically.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to have lots of code reads and that sort of thing. It's not something that I would envisage someone that's not got a lot of time. It's not going to be a sort of pull out bits and components and then sort of plug a game together kind of a platform. There will still be there'll always be sort of coding work, I think, to do. I mean, and talk to me in 10 years' time, maybe it'll be fixed. But at the moment, the plan is each game will be built on top of a core sort of engine that sits at the bottom of it. I'll probably end up with some fairly reusable components for handling bits and pieces, but yeah, each game will still be written, bespoke on top of it, I think.
From this experience and putting the platform together, do you think that sort of regardless of the current lockdown that we're living in, do you think that you'll look at designing other mega games for online, or do you think it's just a temporary thing?
I think they're different, so I don't think it has to be a temporary thing. I think there's sort of two ways you can go with online games. You've got the sort of like the runs of Den of Wolves have happened, which is if we want to play a mega game, we can't go out. Let's play a mega game online approach, which felt good fun. I played in the first one of those, but then there's also and I don't know that I see. I don't know if I'd want to adapt a game that I've written to run online like that, especially not after lockdown ends. But the scope for writing games that are online that can do different things, occupy different space, we can get people globally in to play them. It's all I feel like they're different. They at the moment they're not that different, but I feel like they could be different enough to get their own sort of following and be their own thing. So it would be interesting to see if that happens and how they become distinct.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's definitely a huge space for these kinds of like large-scale online uh, mega games with their own identity, like things that have been made specifically for online. There's still a huge amount of potential there. Yeah, which is
Yeah,
really exciting. All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, John. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm really excited to get into the Anubis Heresy when the full game comes out and check out this platform. Yeah, so before we sign off, did you have any shout outs you wanted to make? And where can people find you online?
so I can share out the control team for playtests, who were, like I keep on saying, amazing and did a lot of good work writing stuff. So that's David, Ed, Kylie, Darren, John, and Rob. So there's normally I'm doing stuff with Reading Megagames. That's where I sort of run most things, which is
Yep.
you can find on readingmegagames.co.uk. And then I've got my own site, KiwiGameDesign.co.uk as well, which that's got things other than mega games on it. But
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time out to record with us. Really interesting stuff. I hope that we get to see and hear a bit more about the online platform you're putting together. And like Jack said, I'm keen to see Anubis Heresy when it's out. And yeah, thanks again.
thanks for having me. And good.
Thanks so much for listening to The Great Game, and thanks again for John for joining us. You can find me at jack@ashtowngames.com.
And as always, you could find me over at thesydneymagagamers.com.
So please tune in for our next episode in 2 weeks, where we'll be doing a post-mortem of our mega game playtest for Dark and Stormy Nights.